Hello my loves, I'm Ellie Frost. Thank you so much for being on my channel where we are talking about the multi-dimensional approach to rapidly and radically healing and transforming during and after narcissistic abuse. And in this video I want to talk about narcissistic abuse and the dark night of the soul. I actually saw someone mention in the comments that they're going through a dark night of the soul, and this is actually a really relevant conversation because I've spoken before about, right, when you leave a narcissist, right, you don't always feel better. In fact, sometimes you can feel worse before you feel better. The reason being, in the relationship, we're in the trauma response of fight and flight, right? The body and the nervous system is in the trauma response a lot of the time, which means that when it actually relaxes, comes away from the situation, all the emotions that have been suppressed, or some of them, can hit us quite hard, right? And so I have a video that's called Why Going No Contact Isn't Enough, which mainly talks about the fact that this is a psychic attack. It happens in the spiritual and energetic realm much more than the physical, in fact. And a lot of you have spoken about that, and we acknowledge that here. When our nervous system starts to relax, that's when the CPTSD, PTSD can come in the most. We see this also with homeless people. So often when homeless people are housed, right, when they actually get in a safer environment, they can flip out and go back to the streets. It's very, very common because they're not in fight and flight anymore. They don't know how to process the overwhelming emotions that can come up when we leave. Now, when you do leave a narcissist, right, or you decide to go into your sovereign life, your authentic power, be who you are, spiritually, it is very common that we can go into what they call the dark night of the soul. So let's just talk about what that is. It's a time in our spiritual journey where we feel like life is meaningless. Everything loses its meaning. We don't feel like we've got a purpose a lot of the time. We can feel very depressed. We can feel life is pointless. We can find it very difficult to find joy or love or any kind of inspiration. We don't know who we are anymore. And the reason that is, and it's part of this process, is that the ego is dissolving, right? The soul never, ever, ever, ever has a dark night, and the soul never dies. Your soul is infinite and eternal. But your ego, your identity, is melting away. And that can cause a lot of anxiety. Again, Sovereign, the tools in Sovereign can help with that, right? But like, the thing to know about it is it's a part of this process. It can be the most scary part sometimes because, you know, when you're kind of a prisoner to a narcissist, although it is traumatic and dramatic, chaotic, you know, not life-giving and inspiring and joyful and happy and peaceful, you do know who you are in the role because you are whatever the narcissist needs you to be. You're the puppet, right? You have shaped yourself into who they need you to be. And when you start being yourself, you'll find that you'll be abused until you go back into who they basically need you to be, to feed off you and to puppet master you, to fulfill their needs. So when we've been in these dynamics, yeah, we haven't been ourselves for a very long time. And the person we were before the narcissist, or maybe a series of narcissists, doesn't exist anymore. You've evolved, actually. Your soul has evolved. Your soul has grown. So just know that, I mean, we hear in the Bible, and we hear a lot of sort of scriptures and wisdom talking about darkest day before dawn. And it's kind of like that. You are not going to die through the dark night of the soul. Your ego is just dissolving. Yeah, your identity is lost as you are now having to reconnect with your heart, be with yourself in a way that you didn't have to before, right? Because again, when you're in narcissistic abuse, everything's about the narcissist, right? You've made them your source of love, security, survival in some way, right? And they've made you a source to them of energy, life force, whatever they need you to be. So forming our own identity, again, I do that in the Sovereign program with you guys. When you feel lost, especially when you've left a narcissist. If you've left a narcissist and gone back, I bet you felt this way. I bet it was because you were probably heading towards the dark night of the soul, or the overwhelming emotions, or not knowing who you were outside of that situation. That dynamic can be extremely paralyzing, and at the beginning can feel like it's actually worse. Right, at the beginning, it could get worse before it gets better, just because, one, as your nervous system relaxes, your body will want to process the emotions. That is the shock, the horror, the PTSD, the CPTSD, which I give you tools for in Sovereign to accelerate that process. Two, we've got to form our identity again. Yeah, our life often, if we've been in romantic relationships or family ones, was built around these people. So our ego freaks out. Yeah, it freaks out because you knew who you were in relation to those dynamics, right? But what about you without those people in your life? If you've got no contact, who are you now, right? And that takes a bit of work, which is why I've opened the Sovereign program for the year, and I'm going to continue to support in the comments and come in live and do Q&As and things, because that is a journey. But what we want to do is what I call self-partner through that journey, which means like be very gentle with ourselves as we are. It's almost like allowing our soul to guide us into the new identity. I know that I've had several dark nights of the soul. And in the last one, I noticed my first reaction was to try and recreate my past life. It was to try and recreate what I thought I'd lost, or I had lost in technical terms, So I tried to get the things in my life that looked the same as they were before the last narcissistic attack. But actually, the universe moved me away from that because I'm not that person anymore. And so now at each stage of our evolution, we're allowing the downloads, we're allowing ourselves to actually receive ourselves at a new level, right? And that takes us getting acquainted with ourselves in a new way and allowing the ego to dissolve, knowing what to do when there's a lot of anxiety or freak out around that, knowing that no dark night of the soul lasts very long. I mean, some people do go into it for a long time, but it doesn't have to last that long. The less we resist it, the more we surrender to it, yeah? And the more we actually process the unhealed emotions and wounds, right? Because that's what the dark night's all about, processing the emotions and wounds. It's not about overriding the process. So although I would say this, during it you still get to decide, yeah? You get to make decisions about feeling good. You get to make decisions about training your mind to see the positive, to tell a new story, right? So you can accelerate the process through that. It doesn't have to be as brutal as some people experience it by, that just kind of sucks you into such a depression, because actually the purpose of it isn't to keep you in depression. Depression is just often when we feel disconnected to ourselves. That's what really causes depression. So if we can stay connected to ourselves during it, even if we feel lost, right? If I feel lost in myself, I don't know who I am anymore, but I kind of allow that. I can do that with you now, right? If you want to receive this energy, just say yes, and I'll be sending you a transmutation of alchemy just to allow what is. So if I can allow myself to be lost, if I can allow myself to not know exactly who I am, right, then I'm willing to receive that next version of me. But if I fight it and try and repeat who I was before, yeah, who I'm not anymore, that's like a grief response of denial. So there's 5 stages of grief, right? And as we go through a dark night of the soul, I often accelerate a grief process with my clients just so that the dark night goes quicker, and the grieving of the relationship and the situations go quicker. But one of the key stages at the beginning of grief is denial. Denial and anger are some of the very first ones before we get to kind of acceptance and connection and peace with the past. So the first thing I want you to know is just accept it. Yeah, and you're allowed to feel angry and you're allowed to feel confused. And if you go into denial, which is what I actually did in my last dark night, you'll just try and recreate the past, maybe without the narcissist, but you're not that person anymore. Yeah, your soul's evolved. And so it's actually the willingness to receive the newness of who we are. It's a very, very uncomfortable space sometimes, right? Because we don't know what it means. Our future is completely different to what we thought it would be. We no longer have the same connections, people, places, things that we thought we would have. Yeah, no, it's part of the process. Definitely something I talk about in the Sovereign Group. I'm going to talk about more, and I can talk about more about this more on the channel as well. So I hope that's helpful. Keep posting your questions. Thank you for being here. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.